Welcome to our first video on best practices for writing quality assessment items, where we will focus on TEKS alignment and bias and sensitivity. A resource called Checklist for Quality Item Design is in the resources folder for this presentation, and each checklist encountered in this video can be found in this resource. The objectives for this video are as follows. Districts will be able to align assessment items to the TEKS, identify the depth of knowledge of the cognitive verb in the TEKS, understand the implications of bias and sensitivity when creating item types, and then evaluate and identify exemplar and non-exemplar question stems and answer choices. The first pillar of writing a quality local assessment is standards alignment, or in the case of Texas, TEKS alignment. We need to ensure that the developed items align to the TEKS and student expectations. Additionally, the assessment items must align to the depth of knowledge and skill identified by the cognitive verb in the student expectation. Pause the video and identify the cognitive verb in TEKS 7.6D. Once the cognitive verb has been identified, resume the video. When examining an item for TEKS alignment, districts should be mindful that the question aligns to the TEKS and aligns to the depth of knowledge of the cognitive verb in the student expectation. Some examples of this include identify, describe, compare, and analyze. In the example from 7.6D Texas History, students are required to explain the political, economic, and social impacts of the agriculture industry. When creating a district assessment, be mindful to ensure that the students are able to explain the political, economic, and social impact of the agricultural industry with the created item. If a question does not have students explaining, rather it has them identify or recognize, it would not meet the depth of knowledge of that cognitive verb. When designing local assessments, districts will need to vet their assessments looking for the issues going back to the TEKS and make sure the items align to the depth of knowledge and skill identified by the cognitive verb. Looking at the exemplar here, using the third grade math TEKS 3.4C, students need to determine the value of a collection of coins and bills. Our cognitive verb is determine. What amount of money did Dana use to buy the snack? Students would then look at the graphics or coins and bills to make this determination. This would be considered an ideal test question for third grade math, meeting both standards and the depth of knowledge of the cognitive verb. Pause the video and examine this question. Using the checklist to the right or paired with the applicable resources for this presentation, determine if the question aligns to the TEKS and meets the depth of knowledge of the cognitive verb. Once you have made the determination, resume the video and check your answers. Now let's check our answers. Students need to compare and order two decimals to the thousands and represent comparisons using symbols greater than, less than, or equal to. It appears that this question does not align to the TEKS, since students are comparing numbers without decimals to the thousands. The question does align with the depth of knowledge of the cognitive verb, as it does have students make a comparison. Another important pillar in writing quality local assessments is understanding bias and sensitivity and how they relate to item development. Districts will be more likely to glean accurate data when questions are fair and reliable. Understanding bias and sensitivity through the data collection lens is key. Districts should be aware of the following when designing assessment items. Is the item free of bias and stereotypes? This could be racial, gender, ethnic, religious, socioeconomic, political, environmental, etc. Another important consideration is that assessment items be free of sensitive or emotionally charged issues. And lastly, districts would also need to ensure that the assessments are accessible and fair for students of diverse backgrounds, so that students of one group don't have an unfair advantage over students of another group. We'll now view some exemplars and practice with some of these items. Let's take a look at an exemplar question. It appears this question wants students to identify the verb tense to complete the sentence. Using the checklist to the right, it appears the item is free of bias and stereotypes, as there's nothing in there about race, gender, etc. Additionally, the item does seem to be free of sensitive or emotionally charged issues and is accessible for students of all backgrounds, as they should all be familiar with running an APE class. Pause the video and use the checklist to determine if the item is free from bias, free from sensitive or emotionally charged issues. Once complete, resume the video. Let's review. The issue with this question is that it is not accessible and fair to students of diverse backgrounds. If a student has not been exposed to golf, they would likely be unable to estimate the length of a typical par 4 golf fairway. It is clear that one group of students have a clear advantage over other groups when answering this question. Districts should be mindful that not all students will have the same experiences for frame of reference. This question would need to be edited to something more accessible to all students. To review this section, first, TEKS alignment. Check if the item aligns with the specified student expectation and the depth of knowledge associated with the cognitive verb. Ensuring this alignment guarantees that the assessment item measures what it intends to. Second, districts need to evaluate the item for bias, sensitivities, accessibility, and fairness. Items should be accessible to all learners and free from any unfair advantages or disadvantages. Everyone should have an equal opportunity to excel based on their knowledge and skills. By adhering to these best practices during the review phase, you're not just creating assessment items, you're crafting instruments that precisely align with educational standards and offer a level playing field for all learners. Thank you for joining our webinar on implementing student growth measures, best practices for writing local quality assessment items, where we explore TEKS alignment, bias and sensitivity, and assessment item development. Please view our sister sessions to learn more about quality item design.